Welcome back to edition 76, the New Year's Eve edition. This is your host, Brian Bullock, and with me I have CizzlingSports. You can catch him on Twitter at CizzlingSports. I'll just go with calling you Sizzle for the pod. How's it going, Sizzle?
It's going great, and I suppose I've got to give you the obligatory high brain.
Yeah, I think you do. I think that's required of civilians, and I believe that I think Dale was the one who said that we might need to start a trend of having the person from Seville who's losing the super contest on the podcast. I saw you're not doing well on that.
Look, you know what? I got no problem with that. I think my response to that was perfectly succinct. It's harsh, but it's fair. In my defense, all I can say is that's really not me participating in the super contest. It's probably my most favorite tout out there, the only tout that I really trust, and that's at Puppy Tout. So, you know, I just feed the plays to the proxy on Puppy Tout's behalf.
Okay, so you're just providing the kibbles and bits.
More or less. Look, Puppy Tout has a little bit of difficulty operating a keyboard, so sometimes she needs some help. So
understandable.
We'll put the blame on her. The good thing about Puppy Tout is, unlike the Steve Fezziks of the world, she'll readily admit to you that stale line contest performance has absolutely nothing to do and no bearing on actual betting acumen. And I can certainly vouch for her as probably the best tout out there.
Well. And it's too bad, too, because that tout doesn't tend to live as long as the other one. So, anyways, as I do with any new guest, I'd like to let people hear a little bit of a betting background of my new guests, such as how long you've been betting, any memorable betting moments, sports you bet, your approach to betting, however you care to introduce yourself from a betting perspective. So, Mr. Sizzle, take it away.
Yeah, no problem. Well, look, let me start by saying, and it's no secret, like I'm not a professional bettor, right? I mean, I don't do this for a living. I practice law for a living. So I'll readily admit that the other civilians out there, many of whom you've had to do the pods with, are much more well-versed in sports betting. If I were to place I guess give myself a label, I'd say I'm way more handicapper than I am actual bettor. Because I don't do this full time, I don't put in the time and the hours necessary to get the best numbers always. But that's just a reality of life. So, I'll start by saying that I have no problems with it, no issues with it. Of course, none of that has any bearing whatsoever on being able to ferret out all of the fraud techniques and criticize the various Twitter fraud and sports touts out there like the civilians are accustomed to doing. In fact, their ability to scam and the tricks and the tactics that they pull quite often have absolutely nothing to do with betting anyway. So I'll start with that. I think that I placed my first sports bet ever, I think in 2001, my first year in law school, right? So look at that. So imagine that, right? I went to law school, and the first thing I did my first year was place a bet on an online offshore sports book. And if I remember correctly, it was thebigbook.com.
Okay.
Which I think, and I'm sure one or more of the civilians can correct it, I think that was the precursor to Bodog. But I don't remember for sure.
Okay, that doesn't sound familiar to me. I think my first online book was BetUS. So,
and BetUS was funny. I never ever had an account with BetUS, but somehow for a number of years they always sent me their pre-football season packets with all those short-term small sample trends for like every single game of the year for every college and NFL team. I got on a mailing list somehow, but I remember how it was. There was a guy in my law school class that I met. I wasn't really friends with, but he was just someone who happened to be in the class. somehow we got into talking about football, and it turned out that this guy was from a family of money. I mean, it was somehow he was connected to oil money, and he was the first true, real degenerate sports betting gambler that I'd ever met. And he was telling tales about when he was in college, he would blow thousands of dollars on a Sunday, betting online on the NFL. But the way he described it, I remember thinking like, oh wow, like that's how hard is this, right? Oh, I'll just figure out how much each football team is going to win by. I watch a lot of football, I can do that. And that's where it got started, and it was really like $10, $5, $10, $25 bets, like nothing at the time, or nothing much higher than that at the time. Pizza bets, I guess, as we call them, right?
Sure. Yep.
And I don't think I actually bet on that first football season after I met this guy. I actually think it was that next summer, if I remember, when I started betting baseball pretty significantly. Again, it was like through thebigbook.com, if I got that right. And whatever. I got lucky, right? I got lucky over one summer betting baseball. I remember that, and I did well, and I thought like, oh, I can do this. And then we all know how that turns out when you first get started.
Yep.
Betting sports. And I remember I had this one bet, then the next football season in the NFL, and I believe it was the year after the Ravens won the Super Bowl, their first Super Bowl with Ray Lewis. And I remember like I put like a $50 bet on the Denver Broncos. I think they were somehow like a +3 underdog at home to the Ravens. And I think it was the Jake Plummer Broncos. And I remember I put a $50 bet down on that, and I was like, that was like a big bet for me at the time. And it was an afternoon game, and it was like, oh, this is money in the bank. And I like took a nap and woke up and saw that like the Ravens crushed them or something like that. And that was sort of I remember that as being the first like oh my God, how could I possibly lose that bet moment?
Yeah.
So to the extent that's a memorable betting moment, I guess it's that. The reality is the more and more you bet on sports, and the deeper you get into it, and the more you learn it, and the more you become experienced with it, right? You don't really have memorable betting moments, right? I mean, you become immune to the swings, to the ups and the downs, and the concept of bad beat becomes something that you understand only fraud touts like to use to explain the way their coin flips that lose, like things like that. So, I mean, I really don't have, I guess, what you call memorable betting moments, right? Because once you've been doing it for a while, you don't get too high on the highs, and you don't get real low on the lows,
Yeah, that's a good way to approach it. And when I did my solo podcast last week, I kind of had my memorable bets are both good and bad. Like I don't tend to overplay either or. Like I know that the good fortune is going to balance out the bad fortune as far as like those bad beats go. You're going to remember the bad beats a lot better. Most people are anyway. So I've just developed a much better mental approach to betting where it's I know that both are right around the corner. So.
Well, it's like the line from Rounders, right? When Matt Damon's character walks into the fraternity house and he says something like, walking in here, I can't remember how I built my bankroll, but I can remember with like perfect clarity every bad beat that I had at the poker table.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess that's just human. I guess that's just human nature. But yeah, right. I mean, the fraud touts, they always love talking about right side losers, and that was a bad beat. But you never see these clowns ever tweet or post about their wrong side winners or their lucky wins, right?
No, never. I mean, and I really don't see anybody doing that. But you're especially not going to get that from a tout. So getting into the tout aspect of here, this is kind of what you approached me with the podcast back in November when you were discussing, being a guest. And by the way, I think I mentioned this before to people, but you really did the right thing as of late, because I haven't really been doing a good job of getting new guests. So when somebody approaches me about doing the pod, like I'll call their bluff if if you really didn't want to be on the pod, you shouldn't have asked me. But so the fact that you approached me and asked me is like, all right, he's making my life a lot easier. So yeah. But anyways, one of the
you realize what you've just done to me there by putting that out there is basically you've put me into the yearning category, which I swear to God, after I think it was listening to the Vegas Watch's last pod, I said to myself, please God, don't ever let me wind up being a yearner or do something in the yearning category. And I think you just put me in that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's right. We all yearn for something that we all yearn for something on Twitter here, but.
Well, look, the reality is that I reached out to you just because I thought it would be interesting, and at least with respect to the the litigation, I could kind of give a unique take on it or something along those lines. But
sure. So
I certainly, like I said earlier in the podcast, I'm certainly not going to do this pod and give you any great betting strategies or information like Groovin Mahubin is able to do, or even Vegas Watch or some of those other people. But
we're always looking for different topics to discuss on here. So to get back on track, I didn't mean to derail that with describing your yearning there. But as I was mentioning, the topics you approached me with were around what you do for a living with law, and the specific cases that you mentioned were the RJ versus Vegas Runner and RJ versus, I believe it's Joyces. Is that how you pronounce it?
That sounds right.
Okay. So for maybe those that haven't, I think you went over your legal background a little bit, and maybe you could incorporate how it relates to these like your background relates to these cases and what you might know about them. But maybe you could describe. I don't know if you want to just go on a case-by-case basis and maybe we could start with the RJ versus VR one, or however you want to do it, as far as like you could just describe the dispute that's going on between these groups and like why it's occurring and what maybe sports bettors and the community should know about each case and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start by saying I'm a commercial litigator, which means that I go to court, I take depositions, I argue motions, I write motions, I argue appeals, I talk to judges, I go to mediations, I settle cases, all that kind of thing. And the commercial part of that means that it's all business litigation, all right? I don't do any personal injury work, I don't do any real estate, I don't do any wills, trusts, anything like that. It's all business-related disputes. And during the time I spent in New York, I handled, and I've even done a couple now that I've been back in Florida, but I don't even know how many lawsuits identical to this RJ versus Vegas Runner case. And these cases are what's known as the disloyal employee case, and I sometimes refer to them as the steal the Coke formula case. And what that means is these cases are usually centered around an employee who's either fired or resigns and walks out the door with all of the confidential information. The confidential customer list, the confidential pricing, the confidential diagrams, the blueprints, the discs, the thumb drives, that kind of thing. And these cases only come into play usually when you have a written contract between the employer and the employee, and that's exactly what RJ Bell had with, I guess we'll call him Vegas Runner. And so what happened was Vegas Runner, he left Pregame. He had a contract with Pregame to be a tout. And I'm not going to go through what's in the papers or regurgitate a lot of that stuff because I think Groovin has done a good job already putting some of that out there, including some of the screenshots from the papers. So if people want to, they can go out there and investigate and kind of look at what the actual things in the papers say. But the bottom line is Vegas Runner had a contract with RJ Bell where he was going to serve as a tout. The contract had in it what's known as a non-compete provision, which says that Vegas Runner, if he ever leaves for 2 years following him leaving Pregame, he can't go to work for a competitor of Pregame or an entity that does the exact same business at Pregame. It says he can't take the confidential information as is standard. And then it has a bunch of interesting, unique clauses. I think my favorite of which is the nom de gambling clause, which is just, it's hard not to read it and be like, is this an actual contractual provision in a serious contract between a business and, I guess, what you'd call a desirable employee, one desirable enough that you need a contract. And the non-gambling clause is pretty funny because it basically says that these touts, to the extent they have a fake name when they join Pregame, they assign their rights to that fake name over to RJ and Pregame for the rest of eternity. So Vegas Runner can't ever be Vegas Runner ever again unless RJ Bell releases him from that non-gambling clause in the contract. And I know it's absurd. It's so funny that they have to, that part of their allegedly sophisticated contractual dealings include provisions detailing their fake gambling personas.
Especially since these guys have to change their personas so much to begin with, anyways.
Right. And you know, not to get too far off on a tangent, right? I mean, we've always suspected that Fezzik also has a contract with Pregame based on the way that he's promoted by Pregame and based on the way that he's promoting the other touts, even though the losing ones. Like, he promoted Teddy Covers significantly, even though Teddy was just hemorrhaging units at Pregame. And that's all stuff that comes out of the contract documents if you look at them. And so the interesting point is you know, Fezzik has been Fezzik for 11, 12 years, something like that. And if it's true that he actually signed this contract, like, he can never be Fezzik again if he ever leaves Pregame. Right? So,
I was actually going to ask you that. I didn't know. I mean, I know his real name, but I didn't know he became Fezzik when he joined Pregame.
Well, no, he was going by the tout name Fezzik since I think 2005. I think.
Oh, okay.
All right, so look, he's certainly been Fezzik since 2008. I know that for a fact. I wasn't really around the forums prior to 2008, but from everything that I heard, you know, there was a Fezzik place at LDA Sports before that, and he sold picks there before that, and he was Fezzik at Shark Sports Betting. But that's what's interesting about these contracts is that even if the tout has had the name forever, for 10 years, when they join Pregame, they assign all rights and interest in it to RJ and Pregame, and they can never ever use it again if they leave.
Do you know? So, are you aware if other organizations like Wager Talk or any of those others that have a bunch of touts are they set up the same way?
No, I don't know that. I haven't seen any documents to that effect. We can assume that, you know, like Brian Leonard is not Brian Leonard's real name, and Marco D'Angelo, I don't think that's his real name either, but they're still going by those names over at Wager Talk, for example. So I think you can make the assumption that they didn't have contracts when they were at Pregame.
Okay.
But Vegas Runner did. And again, let me just be clear, we don't know for sure if Fezzik does. We're just assuming it because the way that they promote him and the way that he acts is very much consistent with the requirements of the contract that we have seen for Vegas Runner.
Sure.
So that's in the contract, and then tied to the Vegas Runner contract is also it has a social media clause, right? Which says that,
oh yeah, I love this, yeah.
Which says that also when they join Pregame, if they have a social media account or if they create one, they have to assign all rights and interest in that also over, and they have to give RJ and Pregame their password, and they can never use it again if they ever leave, and that sort of thing. And although the RJ versus Vegas Runner action, it involves, you know, breach of non-competition, which is Vegas Runner's leaving and going, I guess he went to work for Philly Godfather for a little while, and of course there's now a court order that stopped that. Although that's all involved, the main thrust of this case is RJ getting control back of the Vegas Runner Twitter handle. And again, you know, we're not going to go into all the details of it, but the thing about these cases is they are ridiculously expensive to prosecute as the plaintiff. And that's because what you get to do in these cases is you go to the court, and Pregame did it here. You go to the court and you get you seek what's called a preliminary injunction. And an injunction is the fancy legal word for a court order that orders the defendant to either stop doing something or to start doing something. Okay? And so what they did in this case was, they sued Vegas Runner, and then they went and filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, which is basically an order that says, stop doing everything the contract precludes you from doing and start abiding by the contract. And the significance of that is you go on a motion and you try to get this order, which is basically identical to the ultimate relief you're asking for in the case, right? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want Vegas Runner to comply with his non-compete, and they want him to not use those Twitter accounts and not use his Vegas Runner nom to gambling. But what's interesting about getting these preliminary injunctions is you basically have to prove your case to the judge in the court before you do any discovery, before you take any depositions, before there's a trial, before any evidence is presented to a jury or anything like that. I mean, it's a pretty extraordinary remedy. I mean, proving your case at the very beginning is not something that's easy to do. And the point is, it's wildly expensive, okay? I mean, you're talking about significant investigation, significant motion practice, ridiculous amounts of papers to be filed, usually on an expedited schedule, working all hours to get this stuff done. And the point of all this is, I would estimate here in this case that Pregame spent upwards of $30,000 to $35,000 just to go and get a preliminary injunction against Vegas Runner. Think about that, right? I mean, and the preliminary injunction they went and got was basically turn over all the passwords and stop using the Vegas Runner Twitter account and don't work for Philly Godfather. Like how much of a threat could that possibly be to Pregame? And so it's always been surmised. Why in the world would you spend that much money to do something like that? And the various theories are thrown out there, like, well, is Vegas Runner really a threat to Pregame? Could he really take that much business away from them? Who knows, right? I mean, is RJ trying to send a message to his other contract house? Like, if you leave, I'm coming after you, guns a-blazing? Who knows? But the non-attorney responses that I've seen to this case have pretty much been uniform. This is utterly ridiculous. Why would he waste the time and money doing something like this? And, I guess we'll never know. We'll never know unless there's actually like a trial in this case, and there's a trial transcript that's developed that becomes part of the public record.
Do you think it's going to get to that point?
Yeah, look, I certainly would. With every day that goes by, it's more and more likely it's going to get to that point than it won't. Right? I mean, the way these cases usually go is, if you get your preliminary injunction, think about this for a second. To get a preliminary injunction, and this is a general rule, you have to establish to the court that you've got a substantial likelihood of succeeding on your whole entire case on the merits. So if you get to the point where you convince a judge to grant you a preliminary injunction, you basically convince the judge that you already convinced the judge in the first couple of months of the case that you're already likely to win the whole entire case. Usually then what happens is these cases wind up settling, right? Because the writing's on the wall. The judge has sent a signal to the employee, look, I think they're going to win because I granted them a preliminary injunction. And the employer, for whatever reasons, whether it's money, whether it's stopping competition, whether it's sending a message, feels good about itself, right? Oh, look at this! I shut them down immediately. I proved to the judge that I can win this case, in the first couple of months. And so 9.5 times out of 10, these cases wind up settling because the parties just want a clean break. Like, let's just divorce ourselves and be done with it.
Okay.
That hasn't happened in this case. Like, it's still going on, and they have a trial date set for, I think, well, here, I know I've got the docket pulled up. Let me just look. So they've got a trial date set for November of next year, 2016.
Okay.
And right now they're mired in the discovery process, which usually takes about 18 to 22 months. And the discovery process is kind of something I alluded to earlier, which is serving written discovery demands, serving document demands, inspecting documents, electronic discovery, going through people's computers, sitting down, taking depositions, all that kind of thing. And so, they generally give you a fair amount of time to get through all that. But from what I've seen, I mean, and I've got we've seen some of the papers here, and we can look at the docket, we can analyze. We're obviously not privy to everything that's going on in the case because not everything is filed. But from what we've seen, if this case hasn't settled by now, I think there's at least a 50% chance it's going to wind up going to trial. And the interesting thing about that is Vegas Runner's non-compete lasts for only 2 years. And that's the part that says you can't go work for a competing tout business. Well, he left, we'll ballpark it here. I think the Pregame filed this case in like July of 2014. If you think about that, right, that 2 years runs in July of 2016 anyway. So that period's already going to expire, and you get to that point and you wonder, well, what else is there for RJ to get out of this case? And the answer is really, well, he can get, the court does what, if he wins, the court will do what's called converting the preliminary injunction into a permanent injunction. That's a judgment that's recorded that's, on the books forever. And his ultimate endgame then looks like, well, he's going to get a permanent injunction that says Vegas Runner can never, ever go by Vegas Runner again. Like, what good does that do him? Well, I don't think we'll ever know unless this thing goes to trial. But, $30,000 I'm estimating in the first couple of months of this case, over $100,000 easy in legal fees just to get through discovery most likely. He could be $180,000 into this case by the end of trial, and that excludes even costs relating to an appeal if anybody loses.
Jeez. Yeah, I never know how these legal things get to that high of level of amount of money. Like it baffles my mind just as a simpleton here. And then there's also the RJ versus. I don't know if you've already mentioned everything you want to about the VR cases. You want to?
Yeah. Well, I'll just tie it off real quickly. Among things I guess that haven't already been mentioned by like Grumman and other people that have looked at this. To me, I thought that the most interesting, or I don't know if it's the most interesting, but an interesting thing that's come out of this Pregame versus Vegas Runner case is that in the complaint, Pregame alleges, quote, premium content subscription fees are a main source of revenue for plaintiff's business. All right. So, in other words, touts selling plays for $25 a pop is a main source of revenue for Pregame. It's an admission that's in these papers. And I seem to remember there's occasionally some back and forth, or there's some statement by RJ where he said something like, well, we just sell plays so that we're able to continue providing the great free content on Pregame. Or, we need to make this money to keep the website going. And to the extent that he said that stuff, or he continues to say that stuff, it's obviously entirely contradicted by what's in his complaint that's filed against Vegas Runner, where he flat out admits, I'm in the business to sell coin flips and losing plays to make money. So it's right there. So I just think that's interesting to me.
Sure. And do you think was it VR that is the one that was leaking those sound clips of the recorded conversations between RJ and Fezzik?
Well, we don't know for sure, but I certainly think we've seen circumstantial evidence that makes that the reasonable conclusion. Okay. For example, there was something right at the time when Vegas Runner left Pregame, he posted something on some half-edited web page that said, the real story's going to come out. There's going to be a lot of information that you're going to hear about how Pregame does business and how it treats its clients, and get ready. I'm going to drop bombs, basically, is what it said. And I think that web page has now been deleted. Although thankful for screenshots and conversion to Adobe PDF, right?
Yep.
But I think that's long been deleted, and so certainly the SoundCloud sound bites of RJ admitting that people are going to lose buying his picks, and Fezzik admitting that no one's picking 53%. Look, that's certainly that certainly seems consistent with the type of things Vegas Runner said, or the type of bombs that Vegas Runner said were going to be dropped, right?
Sure.
And then the other piece of circumstantial evidence was, and I haven't looked at it in a while, was the last time I looked at that SoundCloud page, there was some random alleged secret audio of Philly Godfather getting backed off from a blackjack table. which if you listen to it, it's totally it's beyond absurd. Anyone who understands blackjack advantage play would tell you that there was nothing that went down in this allegedly fake audio that actually happens when you get backed off. Like the audio, for example, was Philly Godfather having this like pleasant, cordial back and forth conversation with a pit boss. Oh, why don't you want my play? Well, you're too good for us. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Utterly. I mean, all I could say. Anyone who has any concept of blackjack advantage play will tell you that's utterly ridiculous.
Well, that's like the screenshots he provided from his PPH book, like.
Oh yeah. Every one of them looks the same, just the dollar amounts are changed.
Yeah, it's like we know you're using Philly Godfather's moves. We can't take your bets or something like that. It's like, oh.
But anyway, obviously Vegas Runner left and he went to go work with Philly Godfather for a while. So the same SoundCloud page that has the hidden pregame audio tapes also has an alleged secret conversation of Philly Godfather getting backed off at blackjack. Connect the dots there. It's certainly circumstantial evidence.
Okay. All right. So, and the next case you wanted to bring up was the RJ versus Droisis, and this is I was able to Google this a little bit and read some initial background on this, but I wasn't able to dig too deep into this. So for people that might not know what the pregame versus Droisis or Droisis versus pregame, give a little bit of a background about that from your perspective and what people should know about it.
Well, this is a far less complicated. Even though their dollar amounts are significantly higher, it's a far less complicated lawsuit. Droisis versus pregame is essentially a standard run-of-the-mill breach of contract case. Apparently, Droisis is in the business of web design and web management, and it seems that this is the company that pregame hired to create the new website that's, for months and months has always been coming out next week. Right, and it's really nothing more complicated than pregame signed a contract with Droisis for Droisis to perform its services. Droisis incurred monies owed for its services, just like any other contractor, and pregame wouldn't pay it or refused to pay it. Now, again, we're not gonna go through the whole case or anything because I think people can probably find some of this stuff online and they can read some of the papers that are public record for themselves. But there's a couple of interesting things about Droisis. I mean, the first is that Droisis alleges, and these are round numbers just to make it easier for our discussion. Droisis alleges that it did approximately $1.15 million of work for pregame. Think about that.
Wow.
$1.15 million. Like, what are they creating for pregame for $1.15 million? I mean,
they must be creating like 20 touts or something.
Right? I mean, I don't know. Again, and I'll confess, I don't have any experience in developing websites. I don't know what it generally costs to do that. But I mean, you say $1.15 million, and I'm thinking they're like, it's the redesign, the crappy redesign of the ESPN.com site. I mean, not the pregame webpage or the pregame with its horrible forums and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that they allege they did about $1.15 million worth of work, and they allege that our pregame only paid $300,000 of that. So in other words, they allege, I guess we'll put it in the gambling parlance, they allege they got stiffed to the tune of $850,000 by pregame.
It makes me feel a lot better, I guess, about getting stiffed like $800 from my bookie, the bookie who kind of ran off, and I don't know what happened to him, but
well, right, and it should make Grooven feel a little bit better about getting stiffed out of 10K by Johnny Detroit, right?
Yeah, it probably won't make him feel any better, but yeah, no, and you mentioned this was a case, according to the limited research I did on this, it looked like this case was, or not the case, but they made an investment in Pregame in 2012. So.
Yeah, I saw something about that, but that really didn't appear to be anything that was that issue in the lawsuit.
Okay.
So again, I don't know so much about the investment, but I'll tell you this. This brings me, I think, to what the second interesting point is about the Droyce's case was. The case started in state court and then it was removed to federal court. And one of the things you have to do when you're in federal court is you have to file, we'll call it a statement of interested parties. And the reason why you have to do that is because you have to advise the federal judges of pretty much anyone who has any sort of interest in the litigation, so the federal judges can fairly evaluate whether they have any conflicts that preclude them from hearing the case. And generally in the federal courts, the rule is you have to disclose any corporate parents or anyone or any entity owning 10% of your stock. Now that was interesting because there's always been rumors out there that Colin Cowherd owns a piece of Pregame or ESPN.com owns a piece of Pregame or something like that, right?
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
And even in the Vegas Runner case, I think some of Vegas Runner's papers allege that he was promised a certain stock percentage ownership in Pregame. Well, Pregame filed that statement of interested parties in the Droyce's case, and they identified, they quote, certified that as of this date, other than the named parties, which would be Pregame and Randall James Busack, there is no such interest to report. So, to the extent there's these rumors about these other people or entities that have a significant ownership interest in Pregame, that certainly seems to have been refuted by their federal court filing, which says there is no parent company in Pregame and there's no one that owns 10% or more of its stock. So I thought that was just an interesting point, given the various rumors that you see out there about who's really got an ownership in this thing.
Sure.
And then the third interesting, or at least interesting to me, part of the Droyce's case was that Droyce has not only filed this case against Pregame, it also filed the case against RJ individually and personally. And even though RJ personally didn't sign the contract with Droyce's, right? The contract was signed with Pregame. Those were the two parties to the contract at issue. Droyce's went after RJ personally, alleging, and these are the legal terms, alleging that he's an alter ego of Pregame. And what that means is, let me back up. The reason why we have corporations and LLCs and entities is so that people can do business without fear of personal liability, right? That's the whole point, right? If if the guy who owns Sam's Painting Inc. Drops a ladder on somebody and kills them, usually the injured party can only go after Sam's Painting Inc. for damages, not Sam individually. That's the point of corporate existence. Otherwise, people would, think about it, people would really be deterred from owning their own businesses because there's obviously much greater liability attached to running a professional business.
Sure.
Now, along with that, and it varies from state to state, but there are many requirements for maintaining a valid corporation, and generally speaking, it's that you have to maintain it as a separate existence from the individual owners and managers and directors and officers, right? You have to maintain it as a distinct corporate entity, and that means things like it's got to have its own bank accounts, and you have to keep monthly minutes, and you have to have officers, and you have to have regular elections, and you have bylaws, right? I mean, all these things that make it seem like, look, I'm really operating this thing like a corporate entity so that I can take advantage of all the protections that it offers. When someone doesn't do that, it's called operating the corporate entity as an alter ego of yourself. And that could be like you don't have any bank accounts for the corporate entity. You just funnel everything, all the corporate money or all the business money in and out of your own personal accounts. Like that's an example. Sure. The corporation doesn't have its own personal property like vehicles. Like you operate everything out of your own personal vehicle. Things like that. And more often than not, when it gets into litigation, it involves individuals who are basically looting the company. So Sam's Painting injures somebody. Sam doesn't really operate it as a corporate company. He takes all the money and he puts it in his own personal bank account, and then he says, sorry, injured person, you can sue my company, but it's totally insolvent. Ha ha, good luck, right? In cases like that, the law allows the plaintiff to do something called piercing the corporate veil, which means you can get through the corporate entity to the individual that's operating it as an alter ego of him or herself. And you can collect your damages from the individual.
Okay.
And that's what's interesting about the Joyce's case, was they made all those allegations of alter ego liability with respect to RJ and Pregame. And they basically said, RJ is not operating this as a distinct corporate entity. He's operating it as an alter ego of himself. He's operating it for his own personal gain and profit. And for all these reasons, if we prove our $850,000 worth of damages against Pregame, we should be able to collect that from RJ individually.
Yeah, no, the term itself just makes me laugh, like, associated with him specifically. I don't know, it makes me laugh.
So I mean, it's interesting. I always thought that, well, if this case really got deep into litigation, you can take discovery about all that kind of stuff, right? You can ask to see personal bank accounts, corporate bank accounts, emails, see how to get in. You can really get into how someone is operating a company if you make those types of allegations and they don't get dismissed at the pleading stage. Now, what happened ultimately in Joyce's was they mediated the case and they settled the case. And provided that now we'll never see the settlement agreement because that's fairly stated that's something that's confidential between the parties. So provided that the parties abide by whatever settlement agreement they reached in Joyce's, then that case is going to get dismissed without any of those allegations ever being vetted by RJ, the court, or a jury.
Okay.
But it could have been interesting, to say the least. Now, look, on the flip side, those allegations could have been totally frivolous, and RJ may have been able to get them dismissed on a motion to dismiss before he even answers the original complaint. Right? So, I mean, let's be fair. We don't know. But that case is never, it certainly appears that case is not going to get to that point, and, we'll never know one way or the other. But given everything we know, it's just also funny to see somebody claiming RJ is an alter ego of Pregame, that he's essentially operating the company for his own personal benefit and that he owes them the $850,000.
Yeah, that's and they really doesn't have that much money from what I've heard. I heard that they're not doing as well as they make themselves out to be.
Who knows, right? I mean, we'll never. I guess it's something that we'll never know unless it comes out in discovery in this Vegas Runner lawsuit, and that discovery becomes part of the public record. But otherwise, it's something that we'll never know. Sure.
Okay. And I know you added this to the outline. If you want to touch base on the, even though this isn't really your area of law, but you could, if you want to discuss a little bit about the New York DFS litigation. And I know it's actually going on in Illinois right now too. I know that they right now that they're allowing Illinois players to still play DFS, but from the New York perspective, you could offer maybe a little bit about the New York case as it relates to DFS, and you mentioned the trial court order and the appellate court stay order, since New York is obviously a big state. Regarding.
Yeah, and we won't spend too much time on this. I just thought it would be useful to clarify kind of what's going on with DFS in New York, or at least the procedural posture of what's going on with DFS in New York, so people can understand, because it is a little bit confusing. And again, I thought it would be useful to talk about this because, for example, I've got, years of experience practicing law in the state of New York. What happened was, and this is, what was involved here was the same sort of thing we discussed with respect to the Vegas Runner and Pregame litigation, specifically the concept of preliminary injunctions, right? Even though it's the state attorney general and it's not necessarily a civil proceeding, it's more of an enforcement proceeding or an executive proceeding. The preliminary injunction vehicle was still available, and that's what the New York Attorney General did. He went to the court and he said, look, I'm going to win this case. I've got a substantial likelihood of success on the merits. I'm going to win this case proving that DFS constitutes illegal gambling under New York law, so enter a preliminary injunction precluding FanDuel and DFS from doing that business pending the full outcome of this lawsuit. And the Attorney General won that case in front of the trial judge. They went in front of the court. The court heard it on an expedited basis. They, filed God knows how many reams of paper. Of course, it's all electronic now, but still someone's got to read it. And I think it was right before Thanksgiving, if I remember correctly, that judge, the New York trial court judge, wrote a decision basically saying, Attorney General, I agree that DFS is illegal gambling. The Attorney General has showed his likelihood of success on the merits, and I'm entering an order right now that FanDuel and DraftKings stop doing business in New York pending the outcome of this case. Now, what happened was, of course, I think people are still playing in New York, because what happened was that same day, and this is a function of New York law and New York procedure, right? This is something New York, it's unique to New York, or in other words of saying it, it's not something that you can do in every state, because every state's laws and procedures is different. But what happened was then DraftKings went right to the appellate court and said, look, we've got a good faith basis to appeal. That order is wrong, and we're asking that you stay the trial court's order pending you deciding the appeal. And that's what the appellate court did. It entered a stay of the trial court order that precludes DraftKings and FanDuel from doing business. It didn't overrule the order. All right, and that's where I think maybe the confusion, like you may see some of these DFS heads and DFS shills, right? Anyone with a Twitter handle that includes DFS. You may see these people say things like, we won right away. The appellate court said the trial court was wrong, and that judge didn't know what he was talking about, and so on and so forth. That's not what happened. The appellate court's going to hear the case, and the appellate court may ultimately agree with the trial judge that DFS is illegal gambling under New York law. They may ultimately do that after full briefing and after oral argument and after hearing, from all the parties and everything. That's still a possibility. But because the preliminary injunction remedy is so severe, and think about it, it was pretty severe. It shut down DraftKings and FanDuel in the state of New York without a trial, right? Sure. Because that remedy is so severe, the appellate court has the option of putting a stay on that order pending its deciding the case. Okay. And a stay of the order means, look, the trial judge entered the order, it's still in existence. But we're staying the effect of that order. We're basically putting that order on the shelf pending our full resolution of the case. And I just thought that was something interesting to clarify so people could understand. That way when the DFS heads and shills, over the next month talk about, hey, we won in New York. Well, no, you haven't won yet. You may ultimately lose. You just got a temporary reprieve from a very, very severe preliminary injunction order. Okay. And we'll have to see how that case plays out. But you're absolutely right. New York's a very important state because it's so big, because it's where FanDuel is headquartered, and because it's where it has the highest concentration, I think, on a per capita basis of DFS players. And it's a very sophisticated state, right? I mean, Manhattan and New York County is like the commercial hub of activity in the United States of America. So it's a very important state because whatever those courts decide, you can bet that some of the many of the other states are going to follow right in their path.
Sure, and even with Illinois too, I don't know where they rank in terms of population, but the people are going to give more of a crap about how New York and Illinois roll than say like Wyoming or Rhode Island or like Alaska or something like that. Like nobody, the states that have the biggest populations are going to be the ones that people care the most about.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously Nevada is the most important one, right? Because that's the gambling state. So, I think most states are absolutely going to look to what Nevada has to say.
That's true, yeah.
About DFS. And then right after that, I think you're dead on. It's going to be the New Yorks. And look, there's a federal U.S. attorney investigation going on in Tampa, Florida, into DFS also. So, who knows how that's going to shake out? But that could be sort of a bellwether whenever it comes down.
Sure.
But it's interesting. The point with New York is, don't let the DFS heads fool you. The case isn't over.
Yeah, don't trust anybody that has a certain thing in their handle that is already going to give them a certain bias towards what's going on. So
yeah, and you know what though? And look, and think about this too. Like, how about the irony of the fact that my Twitter handle has sports in it? Like, how embarrassing is that?
Yeah, that's usually a tall tale sign of you're trying to sell me on something that you could just talk to me about without having to sell me on it. I don't know.
If I look, what I probably would. I'll say this. I absolutely wish I would have chosen a different Twitter handle. But look, I mean, Sizzle was taken, so I couldn't be at Sizzle, so I had to come up with something. And I remember it was one of those things where it was like late at night, and I was like, all right, I'll try this Twitter thing out. And it's like, and I didn't feel like sitting there for a half an hour trying to come up with some like creative handle. I was like, okay, CizzlingSports.
Just throw sports at the end of it. It'll work.
And just throw sports at the end of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. Put that in the yearning box, I guess.
Yeah, I think I was able to get Brian Bullock before another Brian Bullock got it. I think there's like a Bullock Brian.
Right.
So he went the opposite way, but that might have been a better branding. I don't know. Brian Bullock was fine, but yeah. All right. So one of the topics that you added here, and this is it seems near and dear to your heart, the whole Fezzik stuff, and the whole with Computer Bob tracking Fezzik, and he was doing it at LVA, now at Pregame. So if you want to give a little bit of a background on Computer Bob, because people might not know who he is and like what the whole tracking of Fezzik has shown people. Obviously, it's not surprising to those who might know how touts operate, but maybe give a little bit of background about that and like however you care to bring up the Computer Bob stuff.
Well, I thought it was an interesting topic only because it's happened it's something that's been going on in the past couple of months. A lot of which has happened after you did the Vegas Watch pods and the Groovin' Mahoovin pods, right? Again, we don't want to. There's a Magna Carta written on Fezzik on the interwebs, between Twitter and the forums, and the RTP Fezzik thread is, I don't even know how many pages long. It's wildly entertaining, I can tell you that much. But and EOG, I mean, it's all out there. So we don't need to spend too much time on it.
And sorry to cut you off. For those who don't know, our RTP, that's roughingthepunter.com. So
that's right. That's right.
One of the better, as far as gambling goes, you probably get more uncensored thoughts on that gambling forum than any other gambling forum, I'm guessing. So.
Well, look. Let me put it to you this way. RTP is like, it's like the very, I don't know. It embodies everything that Seville is. I mean, that's the type of forum it's all about. And just like being wholly insufferable is a mandatory quality to get you into Seville, you'll find that many of the posters over at RTP are insanely insufferable. With that being said, there are some really, really sharp people that post over there, and there's good stuff. I mean, look, like any message board and forum, you're going to get some silly stuff. But I think it's a useful website. I mean, it certainly helped me over the past however many years picking up learnings from it.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just figured I would introduce the site so people knew what it was.
No, that's fair. I think that's fair. I'm glad you did that.
Okay,
so all right. So there was a period of time from 2008 to 2012, give or take, where Fezzik was over at LVA, and I know Groovin has touched on all this, and that's lvasports.com. And Fezzik was the quote lead moderator or lead contributor. That's how they packaged it. But what it really was look, you pay a fee to this board, and he's gonna give you all of his picks, and he posted them in the threads, and people followed him, and that's really what the site was all about. Well, it didn't have how do I say this? Like, it wasn't as I don't know what the right word for it is. The moderators at RTP aren't like RJ Bell, right? Like, or not RTP, I'm sorry. The moderators at LVA, even though, Anthony Curtis was a little suspect at times, they weren't like RJ Bell, right? Like, you didn't get permanently banned because you said, dude, that play was terrible. Right? And so Computer Bob, who is, I think it's fair to say, he's the most respected sports gambling tout, record tracker, and record keeper in like all of forum land. There were a couple others out there. There was a guy named Dreamer, and a guy named Joe Flex, who are also well respected. But Computer Bob is really the guy, and he tracks Fezzik. He didn't track Fezzik the whole time Fezzik was posting over at LVA, but he did it for, I think, 3 years. Maybe I'm off on that.
Okay.
But the point was, he's the most respected record tracker in like all of Forumville when it comes to sports touts. He's the most honest. Nobody questions his integrity. He's insanely detail oriented, and if you're going to be a tout in Forumville on the interwebs, like I can't imagine why you wouldn't want him unless you were a complete and total fraud, which may explain why most touts don't want him to track them. So he tracks Fezzik over at LVA for, let's call it 3 years. And of course, under the watchful and mindful eye of Computer Bob, Fezzik proceeded to dump over 140 units on plays over at LVA, right? And it was just wild stuff. My favorite of which was, I think it was week 1 of the 2012 NFL season, he had a 10-unit Game of the Year play on Buffalo, who proceeded to get absolutely annihilated by the New York Jets that week. And if memory serves me right, and Gruden could probably confirm it, I think he actually also added 2 units to that play at some point, so it wound up being like a 12-unit week 1 Game of the Year on the Buffalo Bills. And I think it was that year too where Fezzik did something ridiculous where he put an ungodly amount of units on futures and NFL regular season wins. I mean, like depleted, like for any reasonable follower, like depleted their whole bankroll just on the futures, and then turns around and says, "Oh yeah, drop a 10-unit play on Buffalo." I mean, it was unbelievable. It was amazing, right? I mean, it was pure entertainment at that point. And so, but anyway, Computer Bob tracked him there, and of course, under the watchful eye of Computer Bob, he dumped over 140 units. I mean, literally buried people who were unfortunate enough to actually follow him. And so then, Fezzik defects to Pregame, and where everything is for the first 2 years or so, everything is self-scored and self-moderated, and or otherwise moderated by biased people who Fezzik is paying to track him. And so the fictional Black program, of course, is, we won 100 units in 2014. So Fezzik goes into a slide, and RJ decides that I guess he's going to, stop the bleeding or try to stifle the bleeding by bringing on Computer Bob to be Fezzik's new official BLAP record keeper. And it's now, now we have Computer Bob. He's the most respected. We're pleased to bring him on board. We're so happy. This is a big step in our direction. Blah blah blah. All that stuff. Like, and so he brought Computer Bob on, I believe, in early August. It was definitely in August. Let's call it early August. Well, so apparently Fezzik is killing it at Pregame, and he wins 100 units in 2014. Well, since Computer Bob has started tracking him in real time, right? Like, and that was the thing with Fezzik's prior record keepers at Pregame. Like, there was no understanding that these guys actually got the plays before the game actually went off. And sometimes the record was updated by these other characters like days after the fact.
Right.
So I mean, anyone with half a brain can be like, there's no way that I can reasonably consider any of this information reliable. And so they bring on Computer Bob, which may have been a move of desperation. And predictably, since August, Fezzik has dumped 40 units or something like that. I think he's on a little uptick right now. But, at one point he had dumped another 40 units, maxed out on 3-unit plays, right? So nothing higher than a 3-unit play, he still managed to dump 40 units. And again, it's under the watchful and considerate eye of Computer Bob, right? And so it's just absolutely hilarious that once the guy gets monitored, or every time the guy gets monitored by a legitimate Seville-approved record keeper. Like, imagine that, an actual Seville-approved record keeper. Every time the guy gets monitored by a legitimate Seville-approved record keeper, he's hemorrhaging units like it's going out of style.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously there's, as Seville and anybody can attest to, there's always going to be short-term variance, good and bad. But if it's consistently bad that's being tracked over, however many years, this has been going on, it seems to be indicating a pattern. It's
pretty amazing. I'll just put it that way. And yes, you're right. We all understand variance, positive and negative.
Yeah.
But it's pretty amazing. And that reminds me, too, even before Computer Bob, there was an incident that I know Gruden has recounted a couple of times there was an incident at LVA where when Fezzik was doing LVA, he went over to Sharp Sports Betting and he like called it he's like, this site stinks. Come on over to my 55% site. And that poster who I referenced earlier, Dreamer, was at Sharp Sports Betting, and he was, somebody called him out, this and that, and it got to the point where they comped Dreamer a subscription to LVA. Dreamer went over to LVA, he compiled Fezzik's record and found that he was really like a 49.5%, and he had dumped a bunch of units there, under his watch also, or under his tabulation also. It's really funny. And then the culmination of all this, which is just really, really hilarious. And again, I think I'm not jacking tweets here to get my own retweets. So let's give credit where credit is due. Grubin pointed it out maybe 1 or 2 days ago. I guess Fezzik's regular season wins for NFL for 2015 are positive units. And so Fezzik posted in the Computer Bob tracking thread at pregame, why don't you go ahead and grade those now? So he can get above 0 and claim 2015 as a winning year, when everyone on earth knows that RSWs aren't graded until all 17 weeks of the NFL season are complete. And Fezzik, a guy who's been betting for God knows how many years, he knows this too.
Oh, of course.
But instead, at the end of week 16, he sees winners and he's like, I got to get up above 0. Bob, why don't you go ahead and just go ahead and tabulate those, and we'll include them in the 2015 records.
Oh yeah, no, that's just touting 101 right there. So
hilarious, just truly hilarious.
Oh, it is. So I don't know if you've exhausted Fezzik. Did you want to go on to some of your favorite non-Fezzik moments for touts?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can talk about a couple of those. These are just ones that I made notes of that I thought were personally funny, or at least they were pretty funny to me. The first one I had was, there's this massive thread over at EOG between Grubin and Johnny Detroit, where Johnny Detroit proposed a $10,000 bet. I think pretty much everyone except 2 people concluded that Grubin easily won the bet, including people at EOG who absolutely hate Grubin. And there was of course there was a welching on paying up, right? Of course there was a stiffing, because that's how internet playground challenges go, right? I mean, that's just the very nature of it. It wouldn't be an internet playground challenge if the loser didn't ultimately stiff. But I thought it was really funny was lost in that thread was there was a Brian Leonard incident when he was still at pregame, where it was hilarious because I guess it was a college basketball package that Brian Leonard, he claimed it was a winning 3-play package, right? And every single person who bought it that posted in his pregame thread was like, what are you talking about? I only got 1 play and it was a loser. And Brian Leonard was like, after the fact, like, oh, no, this is, there were 2 other plays and those were the winners, so it was a plus unit package. Not a single person over there, not a single person in all of pregame ever posted during this period of time, and this was like February, March of 2014, ever posted like, oh yeah, those 2 were included, there was a mistake, you had to get them, you had to do this, whatever. Literally every one of them was like, dude, that's not true, you only had 1 play, what are you doing here? It was like one of the most obvious examples of tout fraud, and it's just unfortunate I thought that it got buried in this mass of 30 or 40 pages or whatever it was of, Johnny Detroit, stiffing Grubin. And another reason why it was funny was because Johnny Detroit, I think, if I remember, he started getting hammered about this Brian Leonard issue in the middle of that thread, and I think we posted like some of the screenshots or some of the dates and times that showed that Leonard had obviously past posted the 2 winners in his pregame quote system log, and like whatever it was, but it came out that Johnny Detroit came out and he conceded that at pregame, touts are allowed to sell you picks without telling you at the time of the sale what the play is, who the team is, what the number is, whether it's a side or whether it's a total. I understand that that's not a new tout trick, right? I mean, I think anyone who's been around understands that that's not a new tout trick. It's been around forever. Like, forever, touts have been contacting people at the beginning of football season and saying, I've got a Week 14 Monday night 5-dime blowout game of the year, right? I mean, it's been going on forever. But the fact that Johnny Detroit admitted that about pregame, and then you've got RJ always being, the most honest and the most transparent, so on and so forth. The fact that he admitted that someone can go to pregame and use their credit card and send a tout $25 for a play and have to wait until the next day to get the email that says what it is, it's ludicrous, right? I mean, just imagine that. So the tout on Saturday morning has no idea what they're going to sell for football on Sunday, right? They have no clue because they're frauds. They're touts. They don't know. They don't know what's going to win. But to maximize sales, they put up a package on Saturday morning that says, NFL Week 10 game of the century, blowout, or what did Fezzik call his one play? His slam your man play, or whatever the heck it was. I mean, these ridiculous monikers.
Yeah, and I really wish I would have had somebody keep track of, like, if there were any holiday, like Santa bag your plays, bag your winnings, something like, something stupid. Because I'm sure that there were some touts that were like that. I know there's been some touts that have, leached off of Memorial Day and, like, 4th of July, something like that, where it's like patriotism, it's.
Oh yeah, what about the Veterans Day, right? I mean, the Veterans Day play.
Yeah, exactly.
So you think about it, like a tout can do that, and then you're like, oh, awesome, and then so you're like, okay, so all you know is it's an NFL play that's going off the next day. You don't know you have no idea what it is. If it's a side, you don't know if it's a total, whatever, money line, I mean, whatever. And so you send your money. You're a sucker, and you send your money, and you're like, all right, I can't wait to bet this. And then you get an email back that says, like, thank you for your purchase. We'll send you an email tomorrow with the play. Right? I mean, if there's not a more obvious way to manipulate suckers, right? Because then what does the tout do? The tout sits there all day and watches the screen, figures out which game moves the most, and then sells it at a stale line that the subscribers can't bet into on Sunday morning.
Right.
And I just thought that the fact that Johnny Detroit, like, I don't know if he didn't understand what he was admitting, or he just didn't care, but I thought the fact that he admitted that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that goes to show you everything that goes into touting right there, rolled up into one.
Yeah, right.
And then the last thing here, this happened earlier this year. This is probably, I don't know if this is in the contention of any of the tweets from this are in contention of the tweet of the year for gambling as far as Jacob goes, but the whole Kelly in Vegas blackjack meltdown at the Wynn, and I know that you highlighted this for those that might not have caught that. Explain a little bit about that meltdown and what made it so funny.
Well, I mean, it was really something special, to say the least, right? And there were. Say that again?
No, it was, and I don't even follow her, but I know enough people that have probably ghost accounts that follow her that retweeted it. Yeah, it was a work of art. It was great to see.
Right. So apparently what happened. I mean, I can't even. I'm trying to keep myself from laughing because obviously that doesn't make for a good pod. But this was so preposterous. Apparently, what happened was she was playing blackjack at the Wynn with her friend, and the dealer determined that her friend wanted to hit on 18, and dealt a card. I think the friend busted, and I think the table lost, right? And so there's this line of tweets by Kelly in Vegas where she says, let's see, where's it start? Okay, she says, oh my, she's talking about what happened. She says, it's actually disgusting. We asked to review the tapes. Wynn Las Vegas refused. It's only fair to let us see the tapes. When you say my friend hit an 18, to see the tapes on a $150 hand, a $150 hand. Wynn refused. Asked to pull the tapes. Gave us a BS answer. And then the cream of the crop was This is truly insane, Win Las Vegas. I can't fathom you would do such bad business. Also changing from a double deck to 6 cards without notice.
Now, for those, and I'm not much of a blackjack player, so for those that might be like me that don't understand what goes into like 2 decks versus 6 decks, that it's, to me at least, it seems like that would be something that would either that would be announced, I would think, or like.
Well, look, I mean, usually, let's put it this way. I've personally never seen the rules of a table change while sitting at a blackjack table.
Okay.
Maybe others have, but I've only seriously been playing blackjack since probably 2009.
Okay.
Well, to back up, yes, there's a huge difference in house advantage between a 6-deck game and a double-deck game, right? The double-deck game is much more player-friendly, although, of course, there's still a house edge built into it. And there's a reason why double-deck games are, like, evaporating in Las Vegas, or the rules are being changed so significantly that the double-deck game is no longer a true double-deck game with any sort of reasonable house edge. But I can tell you, whatever it is that she thinks happened, whatever it was, it didn't happen without notice, unless she's sitting there with a blindfold on and doesn't see them pull the cards out of the shoe, add 4 decks, and reshuffle, and the stack of cards become all of a sudden 6 inches taller.
Yeah, you'd have to be completely wasted, which is possible.
Right, and of course, it's not something that the casino would ever do mid-hand, right? Like,
right.
You're in the middle of a hand, they're not going to all of a sudden show up, add 4 decks to it, and be like, all right, good luck. Finish your hand. I mean, I guess anything's possible in Las Vegas, but I mean that's arguably criminal under the gaming laws.
That would be hard to pull off.
So this whole exchange or this whole rant she went on was just so unbelievably hilarious. Like what does that even mean? And what, were you changed? Let's assume that the hand was over, the pitch was over, right? They got to the shuffle card in the 2-deck pitch. And pitch means it's dealt usually out of the hand. The dealer's holding the cards out of it rather than out of the shoe. Let's say they got to the end of the pitch, and then the pit boss comes over and is like, okay, sorry for the delay. We're going to change this game, and we're going to add this. It's going to become a 6-deck game. Like, what was she chained to the chair? Right? I mean, or was she really truly like a degenerate gambler? Like, I can't get up until I get even. But it's just being a blackjack player. It's just a really amusing line of tweets. And again, all of this was over a lost $150 bet, as if the win with the action that it services would ever give a damn about a lost one. Number one, would ever give a damn about a lost $150 bet, and number two, would ever give a damn about a player who's only playing $150 hands.
So to give some perspective, what are the biggest the higher limit tables for blackjack?
Oh, it can be anything. I mean, you can go to Vegas if you're a known sucker or a known whale, you can get a private table that has $5,000 minimum.
Okay.
I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, your standard limits are anywhere from $15 a hand for the garbage single deck 6-5 blackjack games, up to $200 a hand on a normal night for the best double deck game in town. I mean, that's pretty much the usual spread for what you see on the floor.
Sure, and I know there's most people that listen to this. I mean, I can't say for certain. When I go to Vegas, I'm not doing the blackjack route, so I don't really have a perspective on what's a big amount. But I would expect that most people wouldn't think that $150 is like all that much. Like at least a contingent of people that listen to this.
I mean, look, let me put it. If any civilian thinks $150 is a big blackjack bet, I want out of CIVO. Let me just put it that way.
You're gonna have to fork over your Twitter handle though. So
yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, they're gonna force me to the dark side, right? I'm gonna have to go. I'll have to change the handle to, Sizzling Winners or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, I'll have to tweet out free plays, right? Because all of the media shills and frauds out there, according to them, you're nobody if you don't tweet out free plays, right?
Sizzle picks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just helped you out there. All right, so I'm gonna.
And just to tie that off, I checked and I looked, and unfortunately, Ms. Kelly in Vegas's tweets are not on the DGen Tweet of the Year 15 list. So
okay.
I recognize and appreciate that it's a pretty daunting task for Vegas Watch, but I think that one certainly needs to be on there.
Like I said on the podcast with him, I feel like he needs a selection committee for this year. I feel like it's a very daunting list of. There's been so many different aspects of degeneracy that have gone off the rails.
Now look, make no mistake. Every single one of us who participates in DGen Tweet of the Year, who participates in the voting, needs to acknowledge and appreciate Vegas Watch's efforts with that, because it's a massively daunting task. And look, Vegas Watch is a man of the people. He's doing it all for us. So give credit where credit is due.
I'll give credit. So let's just transition into some of the listener questions, and I can incorporate the Vegas topic into these questions here. But as far as your favorite DGen Tweet of the Year contenders, I know I talked about this with Jacob himself, but there might have been a few others that have come up since then. But as far as your favorites overall this year, from what you've seen, what do you consider your top three? Let's just say top three for time's sake. DGen Tweet of the Year for this year.
Well, that's a really, really tough question. I mean, to your point, that's a really, really difficult question given given our options, right? Given what we've seen this year. So, I mean, I really tried to break it down. First off, the last one I'll give was certainly my favorite, but the others are really in no particular order. Obviously, look, everything this whole Kelly in Vegas blackjack rant is up high there on my list.
Okay.
Pretty much anything Darren Ravel tweeted about gambling in 2015 is on my list, because his gambling tweets or his betting tweets are so unbelievably horrible. The cream of the crop for him was the one that he deleted, but I think this was October 2nd, I think. Oh wait, no, sorry. This would have been before week 1 of this year's NFL season. Fortunately, got a screenshot of it before he deleted it. But it was the one where he said, Pats go from a week 1 1-point underdog versus the Steelers to a 6-point favorite with Brady back. Says at Top Bet Sports. They were never at any point ever an underdog in that week 1 game against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
No.
And Top Bet Sports, I mean, is there really any more that needs to be said about that book?
I mean, you might as well quote my cat,
Yeah, precisely. So, I mean, and again, I don't even really understand I don't understand the whole purpose of Darren Ravel at ESPN. Like I see the guy tweets pictures of stadium food, right? Here's a chocolate-covered French fry with a donut wrap, with a poke through a donut hole. Like, that's fantastic. Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? And how are you providing value to the worldwide leader? All that stuff just goes over my head. But anytime he tweets anything about betting, it's just beyond me. And it's clearly a favorite, I think. And the one here that we got a screen grab of that he deleted is certainly one of my 2015 favorites. And hands down. Look, we're all partial to things that involve us, right? Like involve us personally. So, I mean, hands down, it's no secret that my absolute favorite DGen tweet of 2015 was Sports Boss's tweet about Kyrie Irving. I checked, and I have no idea why that's not on the DGen 2015 list.
You might have to make an appeal to Jacob for that.
if I get one right in, that one's got to be on the list. And I've tweeted a picture of it a couple of times. I mean, I'm obviously blocked. This is the tweet that got me blocked by Sports Boss, and the tweet was so weird and uncomfortable, and the response by me that got me blocked was just so eloquent and simple that I only think it's fair to say, and of course I'm biased, that it was just an absolute work of art. This guy, he tweeted, I think it was the game, I believe it was when the Cleveland Cavaliers were playing at the Spurs in March of this year. It was a regular season game, obviously. And Kyrie Irving, it was going off. Maybe I got the game or the opponent wrong, but whatever game it was, Kyrie Irving was going off. And Sports Boss, right, there it is, sports, right? Congratulations, CizzlingSports. I've now aligned myself with Fezzik Sports and Sports Boss. This is fantastic. Sports Boss tweets out, dude, he's like, stop it, Kyrie. Dude is so wet right now. Number one, what? He's a grown man. Number two, that's wildly uncomfortable, right? And number three, I understand that term wet is maybe a term now that like the kids are using to describe like good things. Like, oh yeah, my jump shot is wet today or whatever. Like, I get it, but I don't think there's any viable circumstances under which a grown man could make the tweet that he made about a professional basketball player. And my response was simply, it was a 4-character response to him. It was non-vulgar and non-confrontational. I simply tweeted back at him, WAT with a question mark. And I got snap blocked in like 35 seconds. On its face, it is what it is. It's not going to mean the same to all people. But that one's near and dear to my heart. And as far as I'm concerned, that was my absolute favorite DGen tweet of the year for 2015.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like that was on the list, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't have the list in front of me.
No, I checked. Well, as near as I could tell, I mean, I made a point. Like I said, I tried to do my work preparing for the all important BBO Knows pod, and I went through the list and I did a Control F search and I certainly couldn't find it. But maybe I looked too.
Oh no, yeah, maybe I'm just remembering retweets of it that didn't get nominated but considered or something like that. But all right, so a couple other questions here. Bellevue Dog addressed this in my individual pod, and I think I'm going to bring this up every pod now because it's just an interesting topic. If by federal law you had to pay one tout for picks, who would it be?
Hands down, CizzlingSports, if I pronounced that correctly. And I have no idea if I did.
I think Askeem, I don't know.
Yeah. Askeem, whatever. We all know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Hands down, it would be that guy. Probably because, for personal reasons, he disgusts me the most. Specifically, he was at some point a practicing attorney, and apparently he's still licensed. And the fact that someone could go from, that line of work, which is my profession, into my profession, which, believe it or not, and despite what you see on the lawyer shows and the lawyer commercials, I mean, it's a highly ethical position it's a highly ethical profession for, respected attorneys and judges and so on and so forth. I mean, it really is. It's like a weird, I don't know, call it like a weird cult in that respect.
Sure.
If you're really professional and you're an honest and you're an attorney and you have integrity, you treat people with respect. You're honest with people. You're honest with judges. You don't play games. You don't play tricks. You don't try to sneak things past people, so on and so forth. So it's particularly disgusting to me to see someone go from that side of the fence to the the obvious fraud tout world that he is. And make no mistake, he is one of the biggest frauds out there. So if I had to, by federal law, I was required, I would subscribe. I would subscribe to him, right? Just to be able to have the ability to go at him and challenge him and really just call him out. So.
All right. cool. No, I'm interested to find out the answers of people with that question in the future, because I feel like it's going to get a different angle each time. So,
well, it's an interesting question because it's really, really hard to answer probably for any civilian that shows up on your pod, right?
Sure.
Because if you ask the average civilian, would you rather pay a tout for picks or have a hot needle shoved through your eye? I think we know what the answer is.
Yeah, and I can only imagine if I asked that question to Ellen Boston,
Yeah, that would have been entertaining.
And maybe I will. Maybe I will.
Yeah.
That'll be for another pod. But Dillback asked, since you live in the South Florida region, your favorite restaurant on South Beach and also your favorite bar.
Tough question, right? And it's a tough question because probably like your average civilian, like I'm really not that cool of a person, right?
Yeah, most people who come on this pod really aren't cool, including the host himself. So yeah.
And look, added to the fact that I've been happily married for over 10 years as well. So my lifestyle down here is not what you think the average South Beach lifestyle would be, right? It's not even close. Nor do I want that type of lifestyle at this point. But so my answer to that is probably one of the more commercialized spots to eat at, which is the News Cafe at, I think it's 8th and Ocean Drive.
Okay.
Right. I mean that's a pretty well-known place. Probably most tourists that have come down to South Beach have eaten at the News Cafe. Not a hole-in-the-wall spot. It is what it is, but probably my favorite restaurant on South Beach. They serve killer mojitos as well.
Okay.
Favorite bar on South Beach is actually a hole-in-the-wall place. It's called Ted's Hideaway, and it's on the south side of 5th Street, which means it's in the area of Joe's Stone Crab. And it really is, I mean, we don't have a lot of places like this, certainly not on Miami Beach, but it really is a hole-in-the-wall sports bar where the drinks are healthy and inexpensive. And it's got the jukebox and the ratty pool table, and it has designated motorcycle parking, which is obviously a big plus for us when we take the motorcycle out. So,
all right.
Highly recommend Ted's Hideaway as kind of like a hole in the wall type spot if you're ever on South Beach and you want to get cheap liquor and watch a game.
Okay, I've never been to the Miami area. The last time I was in Florida was in May for a wedding in Tampa. So yeah, I don't have any Miami experience. So if I ever do go there, I'll have to keep that in mind, because I'm more of a dive bar guy than like a club person. Even
of course.
Even before marriage, I would always prefer a dive bar, anyways. But all right. So
like the last time I've been, I think probably in the last 10 years that I've been to a club, it was maybe 3 years ago in Vegas over March Madness, and it was just that half of our group were single guys, and so they sat in the sports book all day, and so we kind of placated them, and they wanted to go to Marquee at Cosmo.
Okay.
And get a reserved area and a table and all that kind of crap. And so we did that, and that was, I think, the last time I was at a club. And as a testament to my lack of, whatever you want to call it, coolness, the best part about that whole experience for me was that when you get a reserved area at Marquee at Cosmo, you can go up to the security guard, and he'll escort you all the way up to the front of the bathroom line, so you can jump ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I would have no problem with that. Yeah, that sounds good to me, because I'm a frequent visitor of the bathroom. So, all right. So we have one of the next questions here, and I saw this. I got inspired to put this on the outline yesterday. I think when I saw Paul Gasol talk about Chicago deep dish pizza, and he's calling it basically like a pie with cheese or something like that. I don't remember how he said it, and I don't know if you caught wind of that. I know that there was a big discussion on that on Twitter, but as far as pizza goes, I don't know if you have a very strong opinion, like many people do, about the validity of deep dish pizza, because I know don't know what kind of pizza that your area is known for. Obviously, Chicago is known for deep dish. I'm not as passionate about deep dish as some people might be, but I'm not also going to knock it. I actually like deep dish, but I actually like thin crust much better. I kind of want to get your thoughts as an outsider to the whole deep dish scene, and also if you caught wind of that whole conversation. And your
I saw some of it, and I think I saw someone calling it tomato paste in a trash can.
Oh yeah, I think that was a retweet of Kunk, I think.
Well, all right. Look, I got to preface the statement with this. In South Florida, when you order pizza, you get a saltine cracker with ketchup on it.
Yeah, that tells me all I need to know.
Our pizza in South Florida is awful. I can't even describe how terrible it is.
I don't think I could ever move there just based on that. That's
the best pizza. It's sad and pathetic that literally the best pizza you can get probably comes from Papa John's here. I've heard a number of reasons why, and who knows, maybe Learn Doc can chime in on some of this. I know he's got some South Florida experience. I guess allegedly it's because the water down here is not conducive to making dough and bread, and apparently the bagels you get in South Florida are pretty awful also. I can't really speak to that. I don't know. And you see, like when you're up in the Broward County area, there's some place that has billboards a bagel place that has billboards that says something like, we import all of our water from New York City, so you can get real bagels. But the bottom line is, in South Florida, the pizza couldn't be any worse. So, that's the world I live in. And when you live in that world, any pizza is good pizza.
Yeah, that makes me sad.
When I lived up in Buffalo, New York, the pizza was tremendous. It was as good. It's not New York style pizza, right? It's not the big manhole cover thin slice pieces. But it's still really good, really authentic, really good stuff. And every time we go home for the holidays, it's to visit the wife's family. That's kind of what we insist on. We insist on one of the nights that you guys order pizza.
Okay, so you've never ventured your way into Chicago, where they.
I don't think I've ever had real Chicago deep dish pizza from a place that's Sam's Pizzeria.
Okay.
I don't think I've had deep dish pizza other than from a chain.
Okay. Yeah, and I feel like I don't remember. It might have been Muck Nuts who said that outside of Chicago, deep dish is just horrible. But I feel like you do have to have deep dish in Chicago to have a true judgment on it.
I think years ago I was connecting through Midway, I think.
Okay.
And I got a small personal deep dish pizza at one of the places in the airport in Midway, and I remember thinking that it was really good. So
okay.
Take that for what it's worth, but my view of the world is any pizza I can get outside of South Florida is really good pizza.
Okay. So maybe you're not the best judge of it, but I had to bring it up because it was such a passionate topic earlier this week. So
well, I'll do this. I'll make sure I try to find the nearest Uno chain restaurant down here, so I can at least sample something.
Fair enough. All right. So as we're nearing New Year's, obviously we're less than. By the time people listen to this, it'll be less than 27 hours from New Year's. But as far as the New Year's plans and New Year's drinks, I don't know if you have a tradition with your New Year's, if there's a particular liquor, champagne, or beer, something that you'd like to imbibe in while you're or if you even celebrate the New Year. Who knows?
Well, let's start with this. In honor of the pod, I of course, and I tweeted a picture of it. I of course had to make sure I had a carved beer.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And I love the carved beer. That was that's a sponsor of my podcast. They don't know it, but they are. And my bank account doesn't know it, but Yeah.
When I'm sad to say, usually I keep in the fridge. I keep some fat tires and I keep some 312s.
Okay.
Right. And so in honor of the bowless pod, I was going to try to make sure I crack open one of the 312s. Right. We got home from holiday travel on 6 days of holiday travel, 2 families, 3 cities. We got home Monday night, I think it was, and I was just exhausted, and I was like, I'm having a craft beer. And I pulled without knowing it, I pulled the last 312 out of the fridge. So, unfortunately, to celebrate the first appearance on the BBO pod, I'm enjoying a wonderfully warm Coors Light.
That's all right. I would have done the same thing. No, the 312 is my go-to beer, and I'm glad to hear that it's with their new beverage company. I think it's InBev. I'm not sure. I lose track of all of these corporate takeovers of breweries, but I believe it's InBev that handles 312. But I'm glad to see that it's being distributed as it should be, because it's really good beer.
And so as for New Year's, we don't really have a tradition out. I really, I tell you this, I don't drink like the champagnes or the Astis or anything like that. I can't stand that sweet stuff. So I'm certainly not going to be having any of that. I suspect that this New Year's Eve probably will start with some good tequila, probably some Trace Generations Añejo on the rocks, and I presume at some point in the evening I'll move to some rum on the rocks, depending on whatever establishment we wind up at has on the shelf.
Okay.
That's going to be the go-to, and fortunately living in the city, we don't have to worry about getting in cars or driving or doing anything like that. We're basically walking everywhere. So
perfect.
I think it'll be a fun tequila, rum, mostly responsible evening.
Sure. And it's the one holiday that I actually don't mind volunteering to have at least a couple people over. We're having a friend of ours over with his girlfriend, and we're just playing Cards Against Humanity. And And I found out that one of my favorite beers is back on the shelves for winter consumption. So I bought some of that for tomorrow, and I'll probably end up buying something else, and maybe depending on what the wife might want. So yeah, very exciting New Year's. No, but it's one of those holidays I love to not have to worry about driving anywhere. And even when I've gone to a friend's house, I've always spent the night on New Year's because I'm not going to fuck around with the roads on that day. So.
Look, I mean, as many bad things as people can say about Seville, I tend to think we're a fairly responsible group, and so obviously hope everybody makes good decisions and does the right thing and stays safe on New Year's.
Goddamn right. Yeah, I as much as I promote the degeneracy, don't do that shit. So.
Of course. No, look, I mean, we're all in favor of the gambling degeneracy.
Oh, sure.
Let's just not put others at risk, right?
Just don't put everybody else's life at risk. Exactly. So.
Exactly.
I know we kind of skipped over the Vegas portion of the pod here. I don't know if there's anything that you care to touch base on. I think the only other thing, the one thing I did want to touch base on with the Vegas thing that I could ask as a regular question here is the March Madness thing, because I've always looked at March Madness as at first I looked at it as like this thing I have to go to, but then lately I've thought, I really don't like crowds. I feel like it'd be overrated. Have you gone to Vegas during March Madness, and if so, would you consider it an overrated or underrated experience?
Well, look, I think it depends how you do it. I mean, the answer is yes. I go every year for March Madness.
Okay.
But it depends how you do it. The way I do it is, it's the opportunity to meet up with kind of all my old friends from college.
Okay.
So, I guess the answer is when I go, I think it's totally worth it. I love it. It's great. We get together. We sit in the sports book for 14 hours a day. We're all generally married with kids, grown-up professionals. So, we're not interested in like the clubs or kind of like the nonsense or the trouble that you can get into, other than what happens in the sports book. But I think if you do it like that, I think it's totally worth it. I think it's a fantastic way to kind of get together with your buddies that you only get to see maybe once a year. And I mean, obviously, if you like betting on sports, I mean, I think it's the place. I think it's the place to be for that.
Okay. Yeah, because I've debated back and forth on that, and I feel like I've been leaning towards the negative side of things lately on that. But anywho, that was I wanted to at least get that one Vegas topic covered, because there's some others we're just gonna have to skip over because we're the time aspect here. But
sure.
Is there any?
I'll tell you this: if you ever get together with a group and you wind up doing the Vegas thing for March Madness, it's highly plus easy to shell out the money and get yourself a reserved area in whatever sports book you're going to camp out in, because nothing is worse than not having a seat and having to stand on your feet for 14 hours because you're that big of a degenerate.
Okay, and I don't, maybe really quickly or in short form, is there a particular sports book that you consider maybe under the radar that people might not consider when they go to Vegas for March Madness?
I mean, look, not so. I guess no. We don't really go out of the way to go to underrated. Places that you would consider underrated. I like the Mirage Sportsbook. I like the new screens and the new setup they've installed there. I think it's comfortable, particularly if you get a reserved area. I think we all know that the Cantor books are what they are. I think, for example, the one at the Venetian is complete trash. Everyone likes was it Legacy Sportsbook over at Palazzo, and we've done that a couple of times. But again, Cantor is Cantor. Just a quick story. I think I've told it to some civilians, but last March on the first Thursday, they literally moved a line 5 cents on me over a $500 bet. So and it's not like I was being profiled, man. I was there with like a bunch of guys having a good time, making fun action bets, whatever you want to call it. But it's just they're so pathetic. And I know Cantor tends to really aggravate civilians because they like to go to the media and say things like, we take the biggest bets and the biggest action and all that kind of garbage. So for what it's worth, I personally, if I had a choice, I'd totally avoid all the Cantor books, no matter how they're set up or where they are.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it off at that, because I'm sure you could go on Vegas talk a lot more than that, but we'll leave it at that. But
yeah, I wonder how many. Right. I mean, to all the people who have stopped listening by now, right? Now I'm gonna start giving out some Game of the Year winners. So jokes on them.
Yeah, that's what we normally do at this time of the pod, because nobody's listening.
Oh, and that reminds me, look, let's just touch on one more thing, which is utterly hilarious. We didn't talk about it when we talked about the Fezzik stuff. Well, let's just talk about it briefly, and it's relevant because it's new within the last week or so. But how about RJ now allowing his touts to sell guaranteed plays? I
wasn't aware of that, but that's.
Oh my God! Look. If anyone has seen that really horrible Two for the Money sports betting movie with Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I've heard of the movie. I've never seen it.
All right, it's pretty awful. But the point is the story. It's a tout business. At the end, Matthew McConaughey is the tout. He's supposed to be modeled after the Brandon Lang fraud tout character.
Yep.
Towards the end of the movie, he's like losing at like ungodly rates, and the last act of desperation for the business to stay alive is for Al Pacino's character to offer a guaranteed play on the Super Bowl that if it loses, everyone gets their money back, and they cover the bet. It's an act of desperation in that movie, and so I just think it's wildly hilarious that on the heels of Fezzik being tracked by Computer Bob and dumping units like you wouldn't believe over the last couple months, he's now moved into the obvious area of desperation of selling guaranteed plays, which I think, as we suspect, if it loses, you don't get your money back. You probably get a credit of those nonsensical bulk dollars so you can buy more losing plays.
Yeah, it's not a true money back. When you get credits back or store credit, it's basically store credit.
So that's the point. I just, I think it's pretty funny that we've reached the obvious point of desperation with Fezzik and RJ in pregame that now he's selling guaranteed plays.
Yeah, I think that wraps up the whole beginning of the pod very nicely here at the end here, just based on everything that we've talked about. So you can catch him at CizzlingSports. Sizzle, Mr. Sizzle, thanks for coming on the pod. And
my pleasure.
And enjoy your New Year. Everybody enjoy their New Year. Be safe, be responsible, and have fun. And thanks for listening once again. And everyone, I'll catch you guys next year. Have a good night.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian.